Yesterday in Frackville, the mass reading was from 1 Corinthians, and I know some of you were there. Some of you come up on Thursdays to Frackville for mass. But just give you a quick synopsis, because I really want to get into this first reading. It's really good. Corinth, the city that Paul is writing to, was one of probably the most wealthiest, definitely wealthiest cities in the Roman Empire. The geographic location of it made it suitable for that. It had both a port on the east side and also the west side of the city. It was kind of like sit on a peninsula. You go through Corinth to bypass going around the Greek islands. So it was a city heavily known for its merchant trade, but also a city heavily known for its very, let's just say, pagan lifestyle. It was very, very pagan, lots of temples. And with that, on top of that, there was really a high, just put it bluntly, really a high rate of prostitution and other immoral sexual activity in the city, because it was like a travel city, so merchants came in and, they occupied their time, so to speak, that type of mentality. So when St. Paul is writing to the Christians in Corinth, there's really two main issues going on here. One is that there's a lot of division amongst the church community. You had divisions among the rich and the poor. You had divisions probably over other things, over doctrines and stuff like that. But there was a lot of division that existed within the church in Corinth. And the other thing is that there was also a lot of, let's just say that the Christians there were still accustomed to the pagan ways of the city of Corinth. They were given into those sins and temptations that the culture around them kind of provided for them. Put it in succinct that way. So those two things, division and immorality. So that's what we're going to be looking at, probably in the next couple of weeks here. This is a long letter for Corinth. So let's look at this first letter here, this first reading. This is a great reading. We're in chapter 1 still. This is Paul's opening address. And he just talked about the division that existed among the people in Corinth. Okay. So with that in mind now, St. Paul talks about the gospel message and the power of the gospel message. So that key word there, power, the power of the gospel. So remember, a lot of these people are wealthy people, therefore they're powerful people. And now St. Paul wants to talk about the power of the gospel. Because what St. Paul says, what his gospel message is a historical event that those who hear and learn about this historical event have to make a decision about their lives. That's why it's a power. It's a power because the people who hear it are now then forced to make a decision whether to accept Jesus Christ or to reject him. That's why this isn't, for St. Paul, this isn't a philosophy. This isn't a way of life. This is a power of the gospel, not something that you can listen to and say, oh, that's nice. No, you listen to it and you have to accept or reject it. And the gospel message, the power is that Jesus Christ died and rose again. And so you have to accept or reject it. And then St. Paul goes again to people who are accustomed to wealth and people who are accustomed to power and people who are accustomed to prestige. Now St. Paul talks about the cross. And that the cross is something that he is proud to preach about. Because the listeners in St. Paul's time when you preach a message about a man who suffered, died, and was crucified in such a humiliated way, that's not a way to win people over. If you want to get people to believe in Jesus Christ, the human way of thinking wouldn't be to tell that story. But that's exactly where St. Paul goes. He goes right there to not human wisdom, but to divine wisdom. He goes right there to divine wisdom and says that the way that God wins people over is through divine love. That God addresses their deepest fears, their deepest sufferings, their deepest worries and anxieties. That God goes right there to the heart of those matters and suffers there along with us out of divine love. That's what St. Paul is preaching about and so eager and so proud to preach about, even though it's not, again, customary human rhetoric or customary human wisdom. For St. Paul, God's divine wisdom makes foolish that of human wisdom. And so he ends with the foolishness of God. The foolishness of God, that God would become man and suffer and die. The foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom. And the weakness of God, God who suffered and died, is stronger than human strength, because that divine love is what wins people over. That power right there, the power of self-sacrificial love, is what brings people to him and which conquers sin and eventually which conquers death. May God bless you.